Hey Scribblers, Greg Gountanis here, mystery writer helping you on your writing journey. I release videos every week, so make sure you subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. Today's video, how to outline your novel fast. Let's get to it. So before I give you my methods to outlining, a little bit of a disclaimer here. If you happen to be a pantser, this video might not be for you. However, I would implore you to still keep some of these techniques in mind anyway, in the event that you happen to get stuck when you're writing and you want to try something different to get you out of a rut. So whether you're a plotter or a pantser, I think this video could be really helpful for you no matter where you are on your writing journey. So I'm going to go ahead and show you my screen, and I'm going to take you from a bare bones method of outlining all the way to a full-on version. I'm going to be using Scrivener in my on-screen demo, and if you haven't seen my video before about how to use Scrivener, I'm going to link that down in the description below. But this example is going to be using Scrivener. So I hope you like it, and let's get to it. One of the main reasons why I like outlining my projects in Scrivener is just because everything is centralized. I don't have to open up a whole bunch of different windows and switch back and forth. I used to outline in Word, but then once I started learning the in and outs of Scrivener, I just found it a lot easier to outline and work on my novel in Scrivener. So if you haven't seen my tutorial video on Scrivener yet, I'll put that in the description down below. It'll take you through all the basics to get started on Scrivener, and that'll definitely help you out when you're trying to outline using Scrivener. But if you haven't learned Scrivener yet, you can try Word or any other Notepad or any other word processor that'll accomplish that task. But for this example, I'm just going to use Scrivener. So as you can see here on my left-hand side, I have in my binder section here, there's notes, and that's where I went ahead and I put outline 1, outline 2, and outline 3. I went ahead and I created 3 separate text documents. I'm going to take you through 3 different methods to outline your novel quickly so you can get back to starting on your project and getting into the actual writing of your project. So the first method is what I like to call the bare bones. So I'm going to just click here on outline number 1. This is where I really just do plot points. So if you're just starting out and if you're trying to dip your feet into the waters of outlining, so to speak, or just try it out and see if it works for you, I recommend you try something really simple, and that would be just plot points, sort of your main parts of your novel, your big scenes that make up your 3-act structure. I did a video on this previously about how the 3-act structure is really prevalent in novels and screenplays, and how it really helps readers have a satisfying emotional experience. So I'll link that in the description as well if you missed that video. But for this example, the first outlining method, the plot points, so I'm just going to go ahead and create a sample here for a mystery novel. So we'll go ahead and do plot points, sample mystery novel. And then I'm going to enter compose mode here, and it's going to make everything a lot bigger. Let me just put the percentage a little bit higher. So for your plot points, you really want to focus on some of the big scenes that are going to be in your novel. So if we're doing a 3-act structure, which is sort of the standard for a lot of works of fiction or even for screenplays, you have 3 acts. So you have normally your inciting incident. That would be your first big sort of plot point. And this is what kicks the story into gear. So I'm going to just put kicks story into gear. And I'll go ahead and just bullet point it and write down some basic sentence, or it doesn't even necessarily have to be a full sentence, on what kicks my story into gear. So here for this example, we're using a mystery novel. Let's say it's a police procedural. Our main character is a detective, and the whole book is going to be about him solving a specific crime. So for this inciting incident, it could be something as simple as detective, our hero, gets a new case, murder case involving multiple victims. Something as simple as that. So I know that when I sit down to write my novel, I need to have a scene with basically our detective getting a new case. It kicks the story into gear, and it can be helpful for me if I'm sitting down to write and I don't really know how to, get the story moving. I could use this as a guide. And for any of these examples that I'm going to go through today, you can just print out the individual pages and you can just refer to them, as you're writing. You could have it at your side, or you could just toggle back and forth between the manuscript up here and the outline. You can toggle back and forth or print it out. It's just a matter of personal preference. So let's go back in here to our plot points method. So we have the inciting incident. Then we have the other big plot point is the end of Act 1. And that's what we call the turning point. So this is the point in the story. It's about a fourth of the way in where our main character really has a point of no return. Things will never quite be the same again for this main character. So one example we can put here, we're going off of our mystery example, is the detective learns that his family has been kidnapped. So this is a big turning point in the story, obviously, because the whole novel is going to be about him solving the murder case, but now there really is a point of no return for our hero, for our detective, because he now learns his family has been kidnapped and there's really no going back. He has to, solve that case, and he has to, solve the case he's been given. So one thing maybe to make it a little clearer, we could also put he learns his family has been kidnapped. Appears to be same dude that committed the murders or something. Something like that. Doesn't have to be that detailed at this stage. Then our other big plot point is the midpoint. So this is also another turning point in the story. Changes direction. And one example we could put here, going off of our detective theme still, is detective gets a call from the kidnapper. Kidnapper says, he has to come up with money or family dies. So that's a good example of, at the midpoint, the story changes yet again. For our hero, the stakes get a little bit higher, and the conflict is just ratcheted up, right? So, with this bare bones example, it's, as you can see, it's just one sentence, not even really a full sentence or a complete sentence, but it really serves just to sort of get my mind working. So when I sit down to write the novel, I can just look at this, and then this will sort of jog my brain a little bit as I work on continuing with my story. Okay, so then the other big plot point here, I'm going to put the end of Act 2. And this is what we call like the doom and gloom or all is lost moment. So one example of this could be, if it's sort of a darker mystery, we could have detective finds out his family has been killed. So this is a really big moment in the story. This is a point in time that takes our hero to an all-time low, and the reader's going to wonder, how is he going to recover from this moment? Is he going to just falter under all the pressure? Is he going to get back up and really be even more motivated now to find out the killer? That's an example of the end of Act 2. And then the other plot point, the climax, and I'm going to put here sort of the fight or the moment we've all been waiting for. And here, since it's a detective trying to solve the case, you know, an apt example here of a climax could be the detective confronts the killer, a hellacious fight ensues. So that is sort of one method of outlining, right? It's just a guide to help you as you're writing your story. And as you can see, it's really short. It didn't take that much time to do. And obviously, there's going to be a lot of scenes in between all of these different turning points in the story. It's not just going to be 5 scenes in your novel here. However, this is a great way if you're just sort of trying out outlining or you don't know if it's for you. You can try this out and see if it kind of, you know, pushes you along or gets you out of a rut as you're working on your project. So a lot of times initially when I'm working on my writing, I will do a bare bones outline, or I'll do the bare bones plot points to begin with, and then I will sort of expand upon it as I go and get a little bit more detailed. So let's exit out of this one and let's go to outline number 2. And we're just going to title it Sample Outline Mystery Novel. And this is going to be sort of the intermediate route. And this is where we're going to do it by chapters. So we'll do chapter 1, and you can put this in bold or underline it. You could do whatever, but yeah, let's go ahead and go down to font here. Let's underline it. But basically with this intermediate method, we're going to have about 1 sentence for each chapter, and it's going to distill down the main point of that chapter, right? So if, for example, the inciting incident, if it kicks our story into gear, if we want to start that in the first chapter, we can just distill that down. So a lot of times the inciting incident does start a little bit later in the story, not that late. However, for this example, let's just assume that we're going to start our story or our novel with the inciting incident right in chapter 1. So if I'm doing this intermediate method of outlining, I'm just going to put here, detective gets his brand new case, the murder of multiple victims, and that's it. It's very simple. It's 1 sentence, and it distills down what the whole point of the chapter is going to be. So when I sit down afterwards to write that first chapter, I look at this intermediate outline and I say to myself, okay, I need to write a scene here where the detective gets the case, and I go from there. Now, one thing to keep in mind, and I've had a lot of people tell me this, that you know, are not outliners, they are pantsers out there. A lot of people tell me that they don't want to outline because they feel like it's going to stifle the story or lock them in. And I think that's a big misconception. One of the misconceptions with outlining is that you have to follow that outline like to the T, like you have to be sort of a slave to the outline, so to speak, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. Basically, the outline is just a guide to help you with your story. You can change it up as you go. A lot of times I outline a novel or a certain segment of the story or certain chapters, and when I'm writing it, I find that the outline just does not make that much sense at that specific moment in time when I'm writing it, or I find that the outline, you know, doesn't factor in something that just came into my head, so then I just disregard it. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. Just because you're writing up an outline, don't feel pressured to absolutely follow it to the letter if when you're writing, you are thinking of something new and you think it'll better fit your story. If you're writing something and something new comes into your head and you think, oh, this direction for my story is better, disregard that outline and just go in that new direction. You don't have to just follow that outline perfectly, okay? So let's just do a couple more sample chapters here with this method. So chapter 1, detective gets the case. And then, for example, if we're going off of the plot points again, the end of Act 1 would be the detective learns that his family is kidnapped. So that obviously wouldn't be chapter 2. It would be later on in that first act. So let's just do, say, for example, it's chapter 10. 10 chapters in, we learn this new development. So let's go ahead and underline that and put yeah, and sometimes when you do that, you have to go and take out the underlining as well. So let's go ahead and take that out. So yeah, so chapter 10, we're going to put detective comes back home from work and receives a call from the kidnapper. And I'm going to put he receives a call telling him his family has been kidnapped. OMG. So this is sort of a good method if you want something a little bit more substantive than the bare bones. You can do one sentence on each, or if you want something a little bit more detailed than that, you can do another sentence on each. But basically you want to distill each chapter down to the basics of what happens. What's the main point of this chapter or of this scene? So if you're the type of writer that has multiple scenes per chapter, then what you could do is you can delineate this further and you could put chapter 1, scene 1, and you could describe scene 1, and then you could put scene 2 and describe scene 2. So whatever your setup happens to be, but for this example, I just assumed that one chapter was one scene, okay? So that's one other method of outlining. And then if we go to the third method, so let's exit out of this. Now this method is going to be the more intense method. So this is going to be the one where you get into more of the details of what happens with each chapter. So instead of having one sentence distilling down the main focal point of your chapter, you might have a whole paragraph. You might have 2 paragraphs describing every nuance of your story. Now, some people that are plotters out there, they want everything to be super detailed before they go into their actual writing, while other plotters happen to just want sort of the bare bones that we talked about earlier. But this would be the sort of the more extreme example of outlining. So if we stick with our detective example, chapter 1, if you remember, is when the detective gets the new case. We could just make it as detailed as we can. So one example, we could say something like, our hero, Detective Lawrence, cool. This is just a completely random name that came to me right now. But our hero, Detective Lawrence Cool, works in the Chicago Police Department. He is the best of the best. Wife, 2 kids, big house in the burbs. He works a lot of hours, and that is kind of draining on the family, but our hero loves the job and loves helping others. Our story kicks off when Mr. Cool gets a new case on his desk. A big-time murder involving multiple victims. It's a media case too. High stakes. The whole department is in the spotlight now. Mr. Cool goes home and tells his wife that he's going to be working some long hours now. Okay, so this is sort of an example of the more advanced method, the more extreme method here. So the main focal point of this chapter, if we go off of our sample from earlier, is he gets a new case. That kicks the story into gear. So instead of saying he just gets the new case, now we're going into a lot of these nitty-gritty details. So we know here from our sample, he works at the Chicago Police Department. He's got a wife and 2 kids, big house in the burbs, works a lot of hours, but he loves his job, even if it's a little bit draining on his family. So the story kicks off when our sample detective here, Mr. Cool, gets a new case. It's a big-time case involving multiple victims, a big-time murder case. It's a media case, high stakes. Everybody's in the spotlight. And our chapter ends with Mr. Cool basically telling his wife that he got this new case and he's going to be working long hours. So this would be, just sort of a more detailed way to, structure our story. Now, it doesn't necessarily work for everybody. You have to sort of kind of pick and choose what works for you or try out different methods. But with these 3 methods, you have a big gamut to work with. You have a big palette to work with, so to speak. So if we exit out and go back here, so your first method here, you have the sample plot points, the mystery novel that we were working on, the bare bones. Then you have the intermediate, where it's sort of 1 sentence, maybe 2 sentences per scene, kind of summing everything up. And then the third one is our more detailed one where we write about a paragraph, maybe even 2 about each chapter. Now, if you want to take it even further than this, you can describe every possible element or every possible nuance in your story. I read one time that thriller author Jeffrey Deaver has 100+ page outlines. That's one other option if you really want to take it to that level. But I find that these 3 methods, kind of run the gamut quite well and will serve you quite well. So I hope you liked this demo here, and just try it out. If you're in a rut, or if you think you have a case of writer's block or the words aren't flowing, it doesn't hurt to outline. Even if you're a pantser out there, outlining for a little bit or for a scene or 2 or for a chapter or 2, it could get you out of a rut and keep you going with your story. So this is sort of a cool way to conceptualize your story. And you can, like I said, you can either print it out or you can just sort of toggle back and forth between your manuscript and your notes, all in Scrivener. And there you have it, how to outline your novel fast. Now, obviously, speed isn't the priority when writing a novel. We want to focus on quality and make sure our story is the best it can be. However, the takeaway that I wanted all of you to get from this video is that outlining doesn't have to be a laborious process. It doesn't have to be so intensive that it bogs down your actual writing, and it doesn't have to be so intensive that you lose your passion to write your story. It can be something as bare bones as the plot points that I went over, or it could be something a little bit more detailed. So don't let the idea of writing an outline stop you from ultimately getting to your story. So I hope you like this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you have any other tips for scribblers out there, leave them down below. And if you'd like to see any specific videos on my channel, hit me up in the comments below. I really like helping out other writers out there, no matter where they are on their writing journey. I'll see you in the next video. And until next time, keep scribbling.